Welcome back to Podcast 241. I'm your host, Donovan Thompson, with my co-host, Daniel Wingfield, and we are greeted today by our really good friend, Bruce Hutchinson, who's also our mentor, teacher.
Technically, you're still a professor.
Technically,
I still am
a
professor. You guys haven't graduated yet.
I guess technically not.
Should we be careful about what we say today?
No, not at all. We're never careful what we say.
That's very true. I've told Disney to go fuck itself several times on the podcast.
That's true.
Well, now I know what the rules for language are.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's absolutely none at all.
Try to avoid jail.
Well, we took a week off, as you guys known. I was under the weather, had the flu, and we're back. We were talking about The Witcher Part 1 last time. We're going to take a small break from that, and we're going to talk about Witcher Part 2 next week, along with Watchmen and other cool things you guys are interested in. But this week we are going to talk about 1917, directed by Sam Mendes, and all three of us just got done watching it about a couple hours ago, and then to kind of wrap it all up, we're going to kind of talk about some of the Best Picture nominations this year for the Academy Awards. So let's get into it. 1917. What did you guys' initial thoughts on it?
Bruce, why don't you take it away?
It's a good movie. I mean, it's a really good movie. It's technically very well executed.
Right.
You know, of course, there's all the talk about sort of the one take illusion, or technically sort of two take illusion.
Now, is Birdman the first? Was that the first movie to ever do that, or
First mainstream, or
to do the fake one shot the whole film?
I would say I wouldn't. No, I don't think. It's
No. I mean, there's a movie by Alexander Sukarov. Forget the name of it. Takes place in the Russian Museum of Art. It is literally one take.
Okay.
I mean, it's not a fake one take. It's an actual
okay.
90.
Okay.
When video came out, you could do that. So it's like a 90-minute long video.
Wow.
All one take. Yeah, and there's been others. As well. So
more in the art scene.
Yeah.
Though,
Well, even in Alfred Hitchcock, his movie Rope is basically 9 shots that are strung together as if they're one. Yes.
As if they're rope, you would say, strung together.
It's like a rope. That's right.
That's trying way too hard.
Yeah,
I disapprove of that.
Well, I try.
Daniel disliked that.
So Bruce liked the movie. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I was entertained.
Yeah.
Right, and to an extent. I feel like there's a baseline thing where if I go to the movie, I'm entertained. I'm at least somewhat content with the experience. I'm like, okay, was worth it, like to go. I liked it. I don't know if it's a movie that'll stick with me, if that makes sense. I don't think this is a movie that I'm going to be thinking about end of next year when I'm thinking about like my favorite movies of the year. Like our friend Mark, who also saw the movie with us, or maybe it was you that said it. There's a lot of other World War II movies I'd rather see.
I said that actually.
Okay,
yes.
excuse me.
There was some stuff that Mark said that I thought we could talk about too. But,
Saving Private Ryan, Band of Brothers, things like that are like still basically the same kind of a heroic journey through these gruesome scenarios and situations that I'd rather watch. But I enjoyed it. It was good.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a really well-made movie. Sam Mendes behind the director's chair, and we had Roger Deakins. Of course, he's nominated again this year for Best Director. He won, was it 2 years ago for Blade Runner 2049?
DP.
Yeah, for DP.
Director of photography.
Director of photography. Did I say
you
director?
just said director.
Oh, that's what I meant. Director of photography. Read my mind.
They're smart. They knew what you meant.
Yeah, exactly. And they did. Thank you, Bruce. Someone in my corner.
Even though I corrected you too.
That's fine.
Well,
I think on a technical level, again, it's a really well-made movie, and there's a few emotional beats in there that kind of got me a little bit, like a little teary-eyed. But I think at the end of the day, I don't know in a couple of weeks if I'll be thinking about this movie. I think I will be when Oscar time comes around, but it just kind of, I don't know. I think a lot of it for me is the novelty of the one shot. It just kind of feels like that's the biggest thing it has to offer on like on an entertainment level. For me, it's kind of like, how are they going to pull this off? Because when I saw the trailers, there's so many different looking scenes that like the way the trailer stitched together, I was kind of like, how are they going to get from day to night and, through all these different avenues, but only 2 hours if it's one shot. And there was the illusion of one shot. And I think I was always looking for that. And at a certain point, you kind of stopped doing that. But for me, it was just, I don't know. It was interesting. But yeah, let's talk about the plot a little bit. So what's the plot of the movie, guys?
a guy, two soldiers have to run to the other to another battalion to warn them that the attack they're about to make is a trap.
Yeah, Will and Tom. Yeah.
And one of the two soldiers that are going to do though has a brother in the battalion.
Right.
That's going over there. I mean, that's
which sparks Saving Private Ryan, by the way.
Right.
A little bit of a similar.
Oh wow.
Very
yeah.
true.
Whole setup, right? He's not trying to save his brother, but he is trying to save his brother actually.
Yeah. So I mean,
it's not like trying to prevent a trap, like because they kept bringing up, oh, we're trying to prevent the death of 1,600. Like they kind of made a point of that being a big deal. Yeah. So there was more at stake maybe than Saving Private Ryan theoretically.
Yeah, in this one, I mean, in Saving Private Ryan, it isn't a brother trying to save another brother. It's all the brothers have died, and there's only one brother left.
Right.
And this platoon is trying to just save that brother. But,
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, there is a little bit of a similarity, but you're right. In this sense, that the stakes are higher in 1917 because there's 1,600 soldiers who are about to charge into a trap that's been laid by the Germans, and they're trying to get there in time to countermand the order to charge in.
I mean, and one thing to take note is that we will get into spoilers a little bit. So if you haven't seen the movie,
we'll definitely get into spoilers.
Yeah, we do every episode.
You don't watch this episode. If it says 1917, don't watch it.
Yeah, it's true. Just wait till later and come back. But I mean, one thing that was kind of interesting for me, again, we're following Will and Tom, right? And Tom's brother is the one that
it's Tommen from Game of Thrones.
Funny
His
enough,
brother is
Richard Madden,
the young wolf. Yes.
Yeah.
But what was his character's name? I can't remember.
It was one of the Starks, right?
Yeah, it was one of the Starks.
The oldest boy that gets killed at the Red Wedding. You know what we're talking about.
Yeah, and well, I think for me, what was really interesting, like, was that pretty early on. I say early on, maybe a third of the movie, they kind of end up killing off Tom. Right?
Not kinda. They actually,
yeah.
they actually kill him off.
Right. And there's this in the movie. It started off with Tom, right, and he's got on this mission. And he ends up bringing Will along, and then the movie kind of switches over to all of Will's perspective. And
yeah, that was who would we say the protagonist? Like, I guess Will is the protagonist.
Yeah, Will is clearly the protagonist.
But for the first third of it, I mean, I felt totally aligned with Tom more than Will.
I did. I think it's because
Tom was saving Will from like the blowing up thing.
Yeah.
Will was so like not even committed to the mission, and Tom is the one saying, "No, we got to do this." Right? That feels more protagonisty.
Well, I mean, they share the same goal, but you're right. I think we're invited to kind of align ourselves with Tom just a little bit more. Having said that, if you watch the trailer for the movie, I think you kind of maybe know that's coming. Just because a lot of the shots in the trailer are Will by himself.
Right.
And so it's not like I'd really thought about it, but actually when I started watching the movie, I was actually surprised there was two of them because I just thought it was going to be Will. And I was like, wow. Who's this other guy? And so I was already set up that he wasn't going to make it to the end.
I was almost opposite because I only watched the trailer once and like one of them. And I was like, oh, that looks good. And just kind of moved on. Didn't need to see anything else. And so for some reason, but I'd seen all these clips being coming out recently, right? These like special teasers, and they even had the one at the end of the movie where he's running out of the the trench, right. And then the soldiers start running in behind him, and then he gets knocked over a few times.
Yeah, that's in the trailer. It's a great shot, and so that's the thing. He's by himself.
I feel like when I watched that like this week, like it was like a special thing that they did again, and I was like, I feel like I remembered both of them being there.
That's funny.
Like I feel like it was just that like dissonance or whatever. I'm like. No, they were both in the trailer I just watched. Like that's why I was confused when Tom was dying. Yeah.
No, I mean, I thought the same thing too. That's why it's really interesting. I just, it was very sad when he passed away, of course. And I feel like that's kind of like the driving force, even more so for Will. It's kind of like he was uncommitted. He was committed, but he didn't want to be there because he gets blown up, and
It's almost like Will's inciting incident happens when Tom dies, in some way. Like of course he's going along with the mission, but that's when it actually feels like. It's deeper than just orders for him at that point.
I think the real not big clue, but the big thing here is the last shot of the movie when he's looking at his wife and his two daughters because he's even asked by the woman he finds, "Do you have any children?" He ignores.
Doesn't answer, yeah.
And it's kind of like it makes total sense. I mean, it makes sense for anybody, but it really makes sense for him why he doesn't want to do this dangerous mission because he has somebody to go back to.
Although it's unclear to me whether that was his wife or his mother. the woman in the picture looks slightly
She
older.
looks old. She does look older than him.
And so that did make, I was a little confused by that.
I
mean,
do think
the
that most-
family is still the same idea, but
I do feel like everyone had those kind of pictures taken. Everyone looked like 10 years older in those style of like old cameras or something.
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
I just assumed it was because we saw the 2 children first, and then he went to that one. I was thinking kids, mom, you know.
Yeah, that's kind of where I.
What did you think about them saving that for the very end? Like, did that resonate for you guys? Like it was for me. I think it was okay. That's a nice thing. We kept alluding to this like metal case that he put the letter in and stuff, and I assume we'd always figure it out, but I don't know.
I mean, I think honestly, the thing I was worried about, the thing I was most interested in was how are they going to end the movie with this one shot, and seeing him meet Tom's brother, and we immediately go from that to the shot of the tree. As soon as it starts panning and you see the tree, you're like, oh, that's how they're going to do it.
Right.
And he's on
And it is beautiful.
And it's a beautiful shot, and I think, I mean, I guess your question was, is it
like what did you think about them waiting to reveal kind of the motivation behind a lot of what we've seen of him? I mean, because that's kind of what it feels like. Oh, here's the motivation for who he is as a person, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things like that seems like the motivation for every war movie ever is family or some sense of family back home.
Yeah, so why save that to like the last shot?
Well, I don't, what do you think, Bruce?
I didn't mind it. I think you're right. The motivation almost doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I think mostly in seeing that he wants to survive, we're sort of just revealing a little bit of stakes that we didn't know about, because we know that Tom has a brother. We know that from the very beginning. And I think we're sort of led to believe that Will is single and maybe doesn't have a lot of family, that he necessarily has to survive for.
Yeah.
And then we find out
about having to leave. Well, he does the one like that we get the big background on him is that he keeps saying he apparently he went home and couldn't stay.
Right.
And had to come back to the war.
Right.
Which is also a very common thing we've seen in a lot of movies. But I guess the last time we kind of visited that moment for his character was so long from the reveal of his family that I'm only just now being like, okay, I guess that's kind of a nice, like, circular thing for his arc because, he couldn't stay at home because of the war, but now we're realizing he had a family and kids that he should be with or something.
It didn't, I see your point, it didn't bother me much because honestly, the movie's not really about that.
It's true.
The movie, I think, is a more visceral experience, and it's about... it's just about determination and survival, right? I don't know that we're really too worried at any point about like why he might be trying to do what he's doing. He's trying to do it to survive, and in the end, he's a British soldier in World War I, so of course he's going to do his duty, right? I mean, we've seen in movies many times before, and try to save, the people who are going to walk into the trap.
Right. It definitely feels like it's more of course that's happening, and B, it feels like it's more of a device to kind of get us to that last pretty shot.
It's a nice way to end the movie.
It is.
Exactly.
It is. Because you can't end on action.
Right.
Exactly. But I think that, for one reason, I kept also thinking, this side note, that he was going to die at any second. Like, I kind of thought like the movie would
I
end.
kept thinking that, but I kept thinking, this is my like dark humor side where I'm like, I wanted to walk up to the tree and then a sniper just blows his head off or something.
It's funny you mentioned that because they kept showing that tin that he kept the pictures in, and he kept putting it right over his heart. Right. I was sure that at some point he was going to get shot, and the tin was going to save his life.
When he's going up to the German soldier,
I don't know
because he got shot. He gets flown against a wall.
I think he gets grazed because there's blood on the back of his head.
I thought that may have just been from the landing.
That's possible too. Yeah.
They didn't really do anything with where the bullet hit him. Like apparently it wasn't a.
But if it was a typical Hollywood movie when he pulled out the tin,
exactly.
there would have been a dent in the bottom.
Course,
exactly. Yeah. I was waiting for that. I really kind of.
But I think you're right. I think that the family aspect of it, the movie is about a visceral experience about like basically being with these characters through this particular moment in time and experiencing that through the one shot. Like the one shot is kind of like that is the reason why to watch this movie. And maybe not because like it is because of the way it makes you watch the film and align you with them, and it kind of gives you that like not sense of dread, but it almost like you said you're kind of exhausted by watching it.
You feel like you're locked into the same perspective that they have. Like we're not in most movies. The camera has the best perspective on everything. We're like a godlike presence where we're moving around, and to be locked into a similar set of rules almost as the characters we're watching about where our perspective can go and be.
Well, I think if you just take the movie itself and you take away the camera aspect of it and you chop it up however you want to do it, there's nothing special about the movie. There's not other than great performances and decent
I think
score.
the visuals are good, and this is something.
That's what I'm saying. Like that's really kind of what separates it from any other World War II movie or World War I movie or whatever. Period.
War movies, yeah.
I mean, and you know, it's honestly been a long time since I've seen another war movie. I can't. It's hard for me to remember the last World War I or World War II movie. And to me, honestly, the most striking thing,
Wonder Woman.
And I think, okay, fine. Yeah, Wonder Woman and Captain America were the last war movies I've seen. The one shot I did what it feel like I'd added to was just this, like, the reality of the gruesomeness of war.
Yeah,
you know, just the bodies everywhere. That was like soups of like decomposing like soldiers that were left behind, and like the bodies being built into like the trenches and the barricades. But I'm not sure if that's just struck me because I haven't seen a war movie in a long time, because there's a lot of movies that do that well.
Well, yeah, I do think it's about the visceral experience, and I think that's kind of what you were talking about. You know, I think it's interesting when you were saying that I was talking about comparing it to other war movies. I think the question is with a war movie is like, what is it telling us thematically? What is it saying about war and the nature of humanity? I think those are all questions that we often associate with war movies, but I think it's harder and harder to come up with something original to say in a war movie because we know what those themes are so strongly now, you know? Right. And I think if you're gonna make a war movie, you kind of have to figure out new themes. We were talking at some point today, I guess at lunch, about the movie Zero Dark 30.
Right, yeah.
Zero Dark 30 is a war movie, even though it's a different kind of war movie.
Yeah, very true.
I mean, it's a war movie about CIA agents who are doing black ops and interrogating potential terrorists to try to get information from them. And I think whether you like that movie or not, one thing that it has going for it is it's basically a war movie that's asking questions that I don't think very many other war movies have asked, right? So it is taking a new thematic approach to the war movie. Again, it's not a typical war movie, but you know, it's doing something different.
Sure.
And it's not to say that all war movies. It's not to say that all war movies have to have big themes. I mean, you can go to the whatever SEAL Team 6 or whatever the movie was where
they killed Bin Laden. Was it that?
You're talking about 13 hours.
Yeah, so there's a couple. There's 13 hours, SEAL Team 6.
13 hours with John Krasinski in it, right?
Yeah, where they're defending the.
I just remember the poster coming out.
The embassy in Libya, right?
Yeah. I just remember that movie. The posters came out. It was because it was John Krasinski and the guy who played Pam's first boyfriend in The Office.
Oh yeah.
And they're both like SEALs and had these big beards and guns. And it was like all these memes of like they got Pam and like the next shot is them two loading up like that.
But you know, I don't think those movies are doing anything especially original with a war movie. They're just mostly telling an entertaining story. This movie is telling an entertaining story. It's just doing it in a little more serious, highbrow, artistic fashion, you know.
I wonder if we could label, you know, last year, one of my favorite things, Chernobyl. Would you call that a war movie? It's a Cold War movie. And it deals a lot with Cold War politics.
Yeah, I would call it more of a political movie than
I wouldn't call it a movie, though. We've had this conversation.
Yeah, it is a TV show, by the way.
It's a TV show. I mean, that logic, everything it comes on TV is as good or better than movies made. So it's on TV. It's a TV show. That's a whole other podcast.
That's fine. I really don't care enough to argue. Honestly, I don't care. It's entertainment.
Yeah. Okay.
I ingest it either way, the same way.
But you know, our friend Mark was the one thing I was going to say that he mentioned was that the movie isn't really about World War I. You know, you need zero knowledge of World War I to understand this movie, right?
Yeah,
it is literally about two guys and then one guy trying to stop a bunch of troops from jumping out of a trench and engaging the enemy.
I don't think we even see like a German's face up close. Like the closest we get to a enemy's face is the sniper, right? Maybe when he's about to
the sniper and then the pilot.
Okay, that's right, the pilot.
But yeah, I mean you're right. We rarely even have that many Germans that.
Okay, wait. That was something I confused on. The pilot that they rescued, he was German.
I think it was German.
Yes.
Pulling him out of the plane?
The way the planes were flying, though, I thought that the German plane had shot down one of the British planes.
That's what they said. It's 2-on-1, and we have 2.
Yeah.
And the plane that shot down looked identical to one of the other planes up there. So I was assuming.
I think.
But it was the German plane because when they pull him out, he's talking German.
Yeah,
I couldn't even understand. I couldn't even understand what he was saying.
And I think part of that, this whole point of that scene was like, it's kind of hard for me to understand what's happening or who's fighting who just because it's so far away and they kind of look similar. And by the time you get them pulled out and you just got hit basically by a plane and your ears are probably ringing, you're like, oh shit, this guy's a German, and you get stabbed because of it. It's kind of like the disorientation.
That's what I thought. It was a German pilot, or no, an English pilot, and that he was just like going through shock because his legs got burned off and he just crashed a plane.
I think he was German, but it does raise the question of whether they thought he was German.
Part of it maybe why did they save him when they're on this important mission?
That could tell us something about the characters. If he was German and they were trying to save him, then it does tell us that they have extra humanity, right?
If that was true, I don't think, at least for me, I didn't catch that it was clearly German.
It's a confusing moment.
I feel like then if they were trying to make that moment happen, then they should have put a little more light on it, I guess, and made it more of a. Yeah.
Again, I think it's part of the visceralness of experiencing what they're experiencing because like we're confused for a second. Is he German? Is he not? We hear him speak German, but then things are happening and he gets stabbed. So I think it's just kind of reflecting like how it actually be because. I mean, people shoot guns all the time in movies, but if you actually shoot a gun without earmuffs, it's going to be fucking loud and it's going to be hard to figure out what's going on. It's just not as easy as deciphering who's who in a fight, So I think that's part of it. It's very unclear.
Yeah, I feel like if we rewatch the scene, like looking for it, we might surely there was like something on the plane maybe that they showed a glimpse, like a.
You couldn't. I looked for an emblem, and to be honest, I mean, even when he spoke German, I'm assuming he spoke German because I couldn't understand what he was saying. I can usually recognize German, but I couldn't even hear it well enough to recognize it as German. It just seemed clearly not English because I couldn't understand it. And
I thought it was some like Cockney English, like like real like hick English accent on top of like slurring his words.
I think if he was actually English. Will would not have shot him after he stabbed Tom.
Yeah,
that's
even though it's his friend. I think he would have tried to disable him or just jump and pull him away because he'd just been in a plane crash. But the fact that he shoots him, I think, is probably pretty good evidence.
Well, then I do wonder, like, they're on this super important mission, and Tom is trying to save his brother from the Germans, and it feels like an odd thing to invest time into saving this pilot when they're like on a clock.
He's burning up in a plane, and we're just like...
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm just like in war. I understand that as a person that's not in war right now. Yeah. I just wonder in war when it's just so adrenaline everything and like you're starving and thirsty and dehydrated all the time and running 24/7.
At the end of the day, also, though, we have to go back to the it's a movie.
Yeah, so right. Absolutely.
No, but it does raise a larger thing, which is the whole thing is incredibly coincidental.
Of course.
That, this plane gets shot down, literally crashes on top of them.
Right.
And then they pull out a German soldier, and then Tom is not paying enough attention and gets stabbed. Off camera, by the way, while we're following Will.
Man, why did Tom not, I mean, I'm a little, like, when they go over, Tom's just, like, kind of standing there, and the pilot's got his knife, and you're like, you don't think you could have like tried to stop? Like I don't know.
We just don't see it.
Yeah, I mean that's just
and of course that's part of the one shot thing.
Yeah.
And you're saying that everything feels so convenient. I wonder if the one shot aspect of it does that because when it's so smooth like that, and we're like, especially when they like can come to an obstacle and we'll like kind of pan over and watch it from the side before coming back and picking them up in front later.
Yeah.
It's such the camera just feels so scripted. I guess, compared to like a handheld aesthetic.
I think personally, I mean, if there's only like really one time that maybe has like a time jump is when he gets knocked out. Mm-hmm. So if you're gonna have a movie that's 2 hours long and it's one take, then in order for interesting things to happen over 2 hours, everything's going to be coincidental.
Yeah,
it's just the nature of the kind of movie they're making.
They had way too much time to accomplish the mission, so you knew something was going to happen that drastically inconvenienced.
I kind of assume, I guess, other than. I guess him falling asleep is where the big time gap happens. I kept under the impression the whole movie that it was going to say take 8 hours movie time, it would be 2 hours our time. I don't know. That's what I kept expecting to happen. I don't know. Is that a problematic thing that the whole thing's very coincidental? I mean, I mean, I'm asking you, what do you think?
I mean, I think that's the main moment that felt really coincidental. Everything else, I think, is. But you know what you're talking about is setup and payoff, right? Because in order to avoid coincidence, you just have to set things up earlier usually, and then they happen and they don't feel like coincidences because you already have that knowledge.
I mean, the whole backdrop is justifies coincidences, right? It's wartime,
right?
So every time there's a surprise attack or a plane comes in, you're not quite. It is coincidental that it's making them run through the field now.
It's just it's the one thing that has a major impact on
the
plot, right? Because nothing else really impacts the plot that he goes through. I mean, he runs into Germans. Yeah, he's going to run into Germans.
Exactly.
He runs into this French woman kind of in the ruins, but it doesn't impact the story. So it's a quote-unquote
it's a character
coincidence that he runs into a character. But of course he's going to run into somebody somewhere, right?
You always run into the one like refugee in the town or whatnot. Yeah.
But I think the bigger thing, I think Daniel though is right, is that there are times where maybe the camera has to be so choreographed that you sort of notice it.
I felt that way. Yeah.
You know, you sort of notice how it moves around, and it is interesting. It does leave Will sometimes, or Will and Tom.
True.
And sort of shows us something else, and then they show back up in the shot a little bit later.
That's just hide the cut or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the times that, honestly, you're right. The times I really noticed the camera the most were when there was a moment like it's hovering over the water, and I was like, "That's it. How are they doing?"
Right.
That's when I was like, "How are they physically passing off the camera? How are they having such a smooth shot when they're on sand right now or mud?"
Yeah, there's an amazing shot where there's that big crater and it's filled with water, and they walk around the edge, but the camera goes right over the top of it. And meets them on the other side. You do become aware, I think, of the camera.
When that was happening, I just kept visualizing. Even though I'm supposed to watch the movie, I kept visualizing a giant crane.
I was too.
And that's part of that is just us being, I think, so ingrained in filmmaking process, and we're always trying to figure out that kind of stuff.
But I think there is some. I mean, the most impressive part of this movie is the camera movements.
Yeah.
Not even the compositions. Like the compositions are great. They're not,
especially for a camera that's always moving.
Exactly. But I'm not like dropping my jaw. I'm not like, oh my god, I'm gonna remember that shot this year, kind of stuff. And so like, you know, it is a little bit of like a filmmaker's film in that way, maybe a little bit. You know,
I mean, a big
or a
part
DP's film. Even
they're promoting of the movie is talking about the watch.
And Roger Deakins is like one of the first names. It's more. I feel like I'm seeing Roger Deakins' name more than Sam Mendes as far as the names they're putting behind.
There's a long history of that in movies to advertise a movie based on its sort of technological achievements.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah. I mean,
Avatar.
I can't think of another war film that's ever done this before. I think it's probably the first one that's done it, at least at this high of a level. So.
But I mean, like we said earlier, I'm not sure that's a plus for me. I guess like the fact that it does this again, like we said, it doesn't make it better. It doesn't necessarily make it worse. But again, I'd just rather watch probably Saving Private Ryan. Right. If I'm gonna watch a war movie, if that's the mood I'm in, or I'll like binge watch Band of Brothers on HBO, right? Like something where I feel like, and I do feel like the marked difference between those and this is how well we get to know the characters and how much it's more of a character piece than a plot piece. This was a lot of plot. We had some moments of character, but they were always fairly restrained, I feel like, or like, I don't know. We never got too much of what was going on inside. It was a lot of just facial reactions.
You know, you're right.
And it's just part of that's just hard to, you know, you're never cutting, right? You're never cutting the reaction shot. Sometimes you're just on one character. Sometimes when there's one character talking to two characters, you see the two main characters' backs and the main character, the new character on the side talking. But at the same time, they kind of push back a little bit. I mean, I'm kind of not saying thankful for the movie, but I'm thankful at least that I get to go to a movie and sit in a theater and get to watch something like this. Like I'm okay that it's, you know, it maybe not be as great as Saving Private Ryan on a lot of levels, but on another level, I got to see a movie that someone took the time to do one shot in or try to replicate that and on the big screen. It's a different experience than I have experienced before yet in a war film. So that's worth it on that aspect.
Do you feel like it's a lot different to you than Birdman? Because I feel like we've seen a movie do this 5 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's different.
It's less action.
It's different on the sake of the material, and also Birdman is also very fantasy. Like it's very just the character itself is so different than these two characters that you don't know. You can't really trust what you're happening in Birdman, in my opinion.
Yeah, no,
but this
absolutely.
you really can. So it's kind of like the one shot in Birdman is totally different feeling because it's like
it has a different purpose.
It's different purpose, right? And then this, but they have a totally different purpose. That's why it's okay. It's why it's different. I think I like.
I felt like you were saying like the technology or like just the feat of shooting a movie with that aesthetic?
I would say just I think part of it, yes, but that company with being a war film
it's the combination.
It's so unique that it's warranted its existence.
Well, and plus, I think part of maybe your reaction is based on the fact that it was nominated for Best Picture, because we can say this about any movie. Any movie isn't going to be one of the 3 best movies ever in that particular genre, right? Because you're saying, like, I'd rather watch Saving Private Ryan.
Fair enough.
But yeah, you could say that about any movie. Or I'd rather watch this much better drama or horror or whatever.
Right.
I think it's an inch. I think it does add something to the war movie genre, but it's not thematic. It's more stylistic and.
What do you guys think? What do you feel like if it was the same one take style, but it was hand cam style, like shaky cam? What do you feel like you would have liked that, or do you think it would have added or detracted from what we gotten? The only thing that makes me think is like, well, Saving Private Ryan kind of did that, and it's kind of been done with war movies a lot.
Shaky cam it's not always the case, but shaky cam to me implies a lack of refinedness. It seems like it's a tool used for people who are more on the gun and less methodical, because it's just by nature of the kind of production. It's not always the case. Of course, sometimes it's used on purpose.
I think you're being skewed by student films, because that is true on student films.
I feel like it's true for, like, I'd say most indie films, not all of them, but a lot of indie films traditionally they were more shaky cam because they can't afford the nice super fancy rigs, and that's what.
Sure.
I mean, that's just kind of like, maybe not so much now. It's even its own aesthetic, even in blockbuster films for fight scenes or whatever. But I think it being Steadicam in this World War I film is why it's so. When we talked about it, why it's so impressive. How they got these shots, like how is the guy not fucking slipping on the sand when he's filming it? Like, seriously.
I'm guessing it's a lot of automation.
I don't know. That's why it's so impressive. Like, how can they? Part of it has to be visual effects too. Like, they're of course.
I will say there was one shot that clearly had, I shouldn't say clearly, but the shot when he finally reaches I forget the Yorks or whatever, the
guy singing in the trees.
Yeah, and he leans against the tree, and then the camera circles through the troops and comes back around him. It's clearly, to me, like highly stabilized or something. Like there's clearly computer generated.
Which is interesting.
Something happening with that shot, because it just you can sort of tell when like a camera's moving back and forth and it's not actual physical movement. It was very clear to me that they had to do something to that.
That's
shot.
Interesting, because it's the flattest scene in the movie, probably. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're on just trees, and they're all like on level plane, like sitting at the same height. And that's the place you noticed it, where they probably theoretically should have the most stabilization.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was having to go through the people. I don't know what it was, but there was something there. And if you didn't notice it, if you ever have,
maybe because you're locked in with trees and you have.
Honestly, I felt like there was maybe a cut there anyway. Like when he leans against the tree, and then like we pass in front of the tree. That's like the obvious place to cut. On
but still, that whole circular shot, and especially as it comes back to him, you can really tell, because he's the center of this shot, and somehow the shot just starts doing this a little bit, and you're like, clearly something had to have been fixed.
If this wasn't a Roger Deakins film, I would have wondered if there's they shot this with like a lot of like high class drones or something, like to get that, like, because that would be the easiest theory way to do it, because you can GPS map it out where it literally will follow the same line every time.
Yeah, but I've
for those precise movements.
I haven't seen behind the scenes shots for every film, but from what I've seen, I haven't seen a single thing that like drone anything. I'm sure there has to be somewhere.
Well, they make drones that you can just mount cameras to.
Yeah,
so you can just mount an Arri Alexa to a drone.
The scene that got me when I was like, that has to be visual effects, is when they're in the truck, and it basically passes kind of almost like behind the passengers in front of Will, and like it kind of goes out the side as he's getting out of the truck. Right. Because I'm like, it's impossible.
There's no room for
it's
all
impossible.
that to
It's
happen.
impossible. So I was like, it was. I kept looking for like the motion blur of the scene since I'm saying that's the only thing down. It's like the best thing about the movie and the worst thing about the movie is the one shot, because it calls attention to itself. Maybe if you watch it 300 times.
I will say, for better or worse, the aesthetic that it chose, it's going to be all over the forums and subreddits for the next few months, showing the BTSs. Like, because we see that all the time with like, less high profile movies, like, oh, check out this cool BTS of how they did this one shot. There's just going to be dozens of, remember that shot in this, let's watch the BTS, see how they did it.
And we're talking about Deakins, but we can't also ignore Sam Mendes, because look at just even how we leave scenes or how we get into scenes, the shot composition of soldiers in the background, or how like frames, people in the background how they're lit and all that. I mean, that's of course Deakins is shooting that, but he's got a whole team of people behind him, doing his vision. But Sam is the one, I assume, is the one who's calling the most of the decisions on where to place actors and how the camera should move.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of great blocking in that.
It's great.
And there's some really nice. One of my favorite scenes is when they take a break and he has the encounter with the French woman and the baby.
Right.
I actually, our friend Mark was saying that he wished the movie was longer. That was one place where I actually would have liked to have spent more time.
Really?
I don't know how you justify it because he does have to leave and he's
like on a super tight time at that point.
But there's that moment. He comes in. And he walks in, and then he sort of discovers that the woman's behind him. But when he walks in, we see that there's a fire in front of him, and he turns and he sort of looks down the room, and there's a lantern at the end of the room, and we see everything. And then we turn, and the woman comes out of the shadows, and then they have all this encounter, and then we hear a baby crying. And she walks down to the end, and we've already seen that area.
Did we see the drawer open? Because she was in a.
But see, and this is the great combination between DP and director, right? Because the scene is dark enough that you can't really see the dresser very well, and you hear the baby, and as she walks down to the lantern, you're like, "Where's the baby? Where's the baby?" And there's actually kind of like a little white cloth, or there's some lump near the lantern that at first I'm like, oh, that's the baby. But then she keeps going, and then we see that there's a dresser against the corner in the shadows, right? And the baby is in there.
Yeah.
But the whole idea of it that we've actually looked there and not seen the baby, and then later in the scene she walks to the same place we've already looked, and we discover that there was a baby there the whole time. I mean, it's a little thing, but it's a really great way to block that scene, and of course it relied on the lighting as well.
Yeah, no, there's so many cool things like that in the movie that's what I'm saying. Like, you got to give it to Sam, at least. Like, we've all made movies on some level. To even like say we're finished with the movie just like on our own terms is a fucking monumental task. Yeah. And so you got to give them credit when credit's due. Like, there's a lot of smart filmmaking going on.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, I would say that from a technical side, I'm not sure I can think of like mistakes. Like, I mean, we talked about the moments where maybe the stabilization's a little heavy or where the CGI is a little more apparent.
Yeah,
but
so
like
the visual effects from like him jumping, like there's a few human visual effects.
I thought when he went down the waterfall, it felt a little bit old, like a little CGI.
You could tell a little bit, because you were, especially if you were looking for it and knew, okay, there's got to be a transition here, and you can
exactly. Yeah. But beyond that, it's like technically it didn't do anything wrong.
No,
I don't think it did anything. I mean, but maybe aside from just the technical achievement of making that style of film, it also just didn't do anything mind blowing.
Maybe not.
That for me, this is a personal thing, and I think that's what we kind of always go back to. For me, a movie like story is the most important thing. Right. Like I can take or leak visuals, and I can take or leave other things, but if the story is good, that's what matters most. And so I think maybe that's where I'm just coming down on this one, is that the story was unremarkable. Maybe it just didn't just hit me anywhere.
I guess that point.
It's an experience, It's almost
that's true.
Yeah. Not to open up a can of worms here, but when Scorsese was talking about all of this stuff with Marvel movies,
don't do it. Don't do it.
One of the things he was basically saying was that movies have become like attractions,
parks, right?
like theme park attractions, which honestly I don't disagree with him. And this movie is kind of like that, right? I mean, it's almost a little like a ride. It's
right,
and it's a sort of high class ride, so to speak. But I mean, it just sort of puts you in the middle of it and pulls you along with it for this 2-hour thing. But you're right, the character is not especially compelling. The themes aren't especially compelling. The story is very basic, right? And the goals are very basic. So it's really about the experience, I think, more than some deeper meaning that or something that's going to be longer lasting.
One thing I do want to kind of talk about, I agree with all that. Other than where you were fixing ahead.
Wait, with the Marvel?
Yeah, we can do a special podcast.
We totally can.
Yeah,
but
to be fair, and let the audience know, you have liked a lot of the Marvel movies. You've enjoyed them.
Oh, sure. Yeah. But I was just talking about this idea of movies as a theme park experience, sort of as a spectacle, and I think that's what this movie is.
But I agree. And one thing I want to touch upon, there's kind of three different people that are above Will and Tom in the film that are really well-known actors, and they just kind of appear throughout the, each individual actor or whatever sequence, or I haven't look at it, and that's Colin Firth, Mark Strong, and then at the very end, Benedict Cumberbatch. Yeah. Since they're such small scenes and have such small, and they're pivotal roles, but is it weird that we have these really big famous actors come in, popping out of the movie? Did it pull you out? Like, oh, they're turning their back. Who is it? It's Benedict Cumberbatch.
Only because I was thinking, was this just like a budget cut thing? Like we're like, we can still put them on the box. They'll still be listed into the cast, but we only need you for a half a day.
I mean, you kind of wonder why they agreed to do the film for such a small role that really doesn't give them a lot to work, like to other than a paycheck, but it doesn't really give them, what can
Honestly,
they do?
I would assume that it's because they're British. And this is a British film. And
kind of like paying homage to it, I guess.
Yeah, and it's about World War I, which I think is a bigger war for
British
Europe than for Americans,
us,
Right.
and especially for the British.
Right.
So I agree. I think that's why they were involved. It is interesting. There was no problem with Colin Firth. He's the general at the beginning. It's fine. He's introduced. There's no problem.
It's very dark.
I did think it was odd that they introduced Mark Strong. So, like, we see his boots first, and then we hear his voice, and we hear him talking, and I'm going, okay, I think that's Mark Strong.
Well, I kept trying to work through it, and I was like, Mark Strong.
Yeah, and then he walks away, and we kind of see him from a distance, and if you look closely, okay, yeah, that's Mark Strong. And then we can sort of get closer, and it's just sort of revealed. So I did think it was a little weird that they kind of made a point of introducing him without just like, here's the guy. But certainly the big one was Benedict Cumberbatch, because it's the end of the movie. It is literally the climax of the movie where he's delivering these orders to not, to cancel the invasion or whatever. And we're trying to, we've been given a hint by Mark Strong's character that maybe this guy isn't going to listen, and maybe he's going to go through with it anyway. And no one's had the time for him so far. Right. And we're all on pins and needles. What's going to happen?
Yes.
And then he turns around and it's Smog, right?
Yeah.
It's Benedict Cumberbatch. Yeah. And it does, I do think it kind of throws you briefly out of the movie.
Well, I don't feel like they set up something there, like a conflict, right? Like, be sure there's witnesses, right? I don't think that paid off. Like, it was like, you were like, okay, what is this guy about? And then they're like, no, he just says it's a trap. And he's like, okay, I'll read it now. And then, okay, fine, I agree. It's like.
It felt like the big moment he had to get past is literally running over the first line. Like, whenever. Yeah. I feel like that's the most triumphant part. Yeah, you're right. When he gets that, it's kind of anticlimactic. Kind of
like I was kind of expecting a Sergeant Dan kind of character, right? Like someone that's like addicted to battling and has lost reason and just wants to kill people and that kind of thing. And
even visually, by the way, that because they're in this tiny little bunker room.
Yes,
there's no room. It's completely drab.
All gray.
It had a bit of an anticlimactic feel between all of that, and then you're distracted by Benedict Cumberbatch.
And then he says, fuck off.
Right.
Which I was just like, that sucks.
I mean, I'm sure that's realistic because a general or whatever he was is like, I got shit to do.
Here's another thing. What is it interesting, or is it even worth talking about that he does that before he talks to Tom's brother? Like, why doesn't that talk to Tom's brother?
It makes logical sense. Because they're literally invading right now. I need to stop them ASAP, otherwise more people will die.
I guess I should say, that makes total sense. Is it problematic on a film level that you're doing the main thing first and then you're doing this?
No, because it's, this is kind of weird because the character really doesn't have an internal goal, but this kind of is sort of like, it's the meaningful thing he has to, the emotional thing, right? Stopping the attack is sort of the external thing, but we don't know any of those people. We don't have an emotional connection to that. Right. We do have an emotional connection to Tom, the death of the brother and having to tell the brother, the other brother. But that, a movies do it both ways. And I think ending on the emotional moment for Will, because what else would we have done? Otherwise it would have been Benedict Cumberbatch saying "fuck off," and then he just sits down and the movie cuts. And the end. Right?
To be fair, I do think kind of what you're saying. I do agree that a movie that is more action than story, more action than character, it would kind of more fall in line with something like that to end on like a big achievement in plot. I guess like maybe it may have made more sense if he had run upon Tom's brother on his way, like about to run onto the front line and had the moment there before he's running out or something and on his way to the general or something. Because I do, it is because we've said, it kind of pushes, it puts the experience above maybe the nuance of the story and characters, but then it ends on a character moment and kind of leaves you with its weaker half as a movie almost.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think you still have to end sort of on that emotional note. I just don't know how you.
Yeah, you're probably right.
On the he stopped the invasion.
And there's nothing particularly exciting about telling a general,
right?
Don't do it.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe there is a way of doing it.
And and you normally have some sort of denouement that's going to be the last 5 minutes of the movie, and that's where this happened.
Right.
And I think for me it was the right choice. I don't think
You're
it would have
right.
worked any other way.
Cool. So, like, what's our final thoughts on the movie as a whole? Like, real quick, just go through it. I mean, we talked about it. Let's do it again.
I enjoyed it. It was a good experience. I probably won't remember it. Is it nominated for Best Picture?
It's nominated for a lot of things.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that. For Best Picture, at least, I'm sure it deserves it for like cinematography and things like that. But yeah, it was a fine movie. That's the best, probably best I can say.
Yeah, it won. It actually won Best Drama at Golden Globes.
It did. That's what surprised.
Which I was surprised by, and I think I don't remember what the other Golden Globe nominees were for that category, but I assume they're similar.
They're almost
for the Academy Awards,
yeah.
And it seemed an odd choice to me.
Do you think it has
compared to the other movies?
Yeah, we're going to get into that in a second, but do you think it has a good chance of winning 1917?
Only because it won the Golden Globe? I don't think it will. And of course, one thing we got to remember is, sometimes there is correlation there, but the Golden Globes are voted on by the Foreign Press Association, so a lot of reporters from other countries where World War I might be more resonant.
That's an interesting point, yeah.
Probably going to be less resonant for...
Has the BAFTA already happened, or is it the British...
The BAFTA nominees were announced recently, but I don't think the awards have happened yet.
I wonder what it'll do. Yeah, we can check that out here in a second. Yeah, but your thought, you enjoyed it.
Yeah, overall, I thought it was a very good war movie. I thought it was compositionally and technically, very well done. But again, in the end, I think thematically, it didn't necessarily have a lot to say, and it was a little bit more of a visceral experience. And on that level, it was a very good movie. Maybe not a great movie.
Right. No, I agree with both these guys here. I think it was a good movie and definitely something to watch. I feel like it's kind of the same way I feel about Gravity. I never saw Gravity ever.
What?
And the reason
you feel about
you
feel about this,
but let me finish.
So you never saw this movie. It's basically what you're saying.
It's more of like I haven't seen Gravity because I'm like, well, I can't experience it the way I can't see it in the theater. It's a little different because it's 3D and everything else, but I feel like if I had missed 1917 in the theater, I would have been less inclined to watch it. And that's how
that makes sense.
It's a cinematic experience.
Exactly. I feel like watching. Yes. I mean, and
even the sound design was very precise. Like, because there was tons of things off screen that got alluded to with sound design.
Yeah.
A lot of times, it was good.
And
so if you're going to see it in the theater.
Exactly. See it in the theater, as you should see all movies.
See it at the rave if you're in Arkansas, because I feel like they do much better with sound than every other thing.
They do.
The sound is just bad.
Overall, I think I
it's
still
the best
think I've been to theaters all the time, like wherever I can go in the state, and to me, I still have not been to a better theater than the Rave.
The Rave's a really good theater.
I went to the Dolby Theater in LA, and it was way too expensive. It was like $21 for a normal ticket.
Yeah.
But I had I was very impressed with the sound and visuals.
I went to probably
hopefully,
literally 10.
Exactly.
You would hope to be, right? The Dolby Theater.
I went to 10 different theaters in LA, and I'm telling you that the Rave still beats them all. I don't get it. I don't know why Arkansas has the best theater of all time. I don't understand it.
That is odd.
I keep thinking I'll find the next best, but I can't. Cool. So, again, I liked it. Go watch it. So we talked about 1917. Let's kind of delve a little bit into the Best Picture nominations now. Any one of us have seen all 9 nominations, and there's 9 this year, which is kind of they don't happen a lot where we have more than 6 or 7.
Is there a rule?
There's more than 10.
There's not a rule, but they opened that up after Dark Knight 2007 to have, I think 10 was like the new standard, but very rarely we reach 10 is my point.
Yeah.
We normally don't reach 9. We normally have 7 or 8.
We've had 9 a couple of times.
Yeah, but in 10 years, it's not many times though. So let's look at the nominations real quick. So we have 1917, which we just talked about. We have Ford versus Ferrari. We have The Irishman. We have Jojo Rabbit. We have Joker. We have Little Women, Marriage Story, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and finally Parasite. So is there any front runner that you think will happen for Best Picture?
There's obvious ones. I feel like right.
Go
The
for
big
it.
names. Tarantino.
When was the last time he won Best? Has he won Best Picture ever?
He's not won Best Picture.
But he's
I
won
don't think he's
Best-
won Best Director either. He's
And
only won Best Screenplay.
I could
Really?
see this being the Hollywood making it up to him, and also because he made a movie right for them.
This is his 9th film, so it's kind of like if they.
And he said he's only doing 10.
I mean, everyone agrees this is
if
really-
the 10th movie
And
sucks, they
did
miss
you
their
guys-
chance.
Exactly.
Did you
I can
guys
see
the
that. I can see it happening.
The recent headline that he's going to be directing a spin-off series
Yeah, I saw that.
of Bounty Law.
It's
He's
5
going to be
episodes.
directing.
Okay.
Yeah.
5 episodes.
Well, he's done TV before, and obviously those don't
He
count.
has. Yeah,
Sure.
they don't count towards the
But I
10.
wonder, is this? You think this is going to streaming platforms, or it will be on TV?
It wouldn't surprise me if someone like Netflix just gobbles
I would.
it up.
Yeah.
I mean-
who has his other films right now? Netflix had Django for a little
They have
while.
a couple of them.
Yeah.
I think some of them are on HBO just for whatever reason.
Okay. Yeah, I can see it being a streaming thing, but
I mean,
yeah,
it's
interesting.
just-
Bounty Law series. You think it's gonna be Matt not Matt Damon?
Leo DiCaprio.
Leo DiCaprio. Yeah, you think he's coming back for that?
I think he would for Tarantino. I think
Yeah.
he would.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
he. I think he
It'll
would.
probably
For
be all
Tarantino.
down to schedule.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
But
I think.
yeah,
he-
I think for me, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is probably one of the favorites. And I haven't done all the who won all the other things and
Yeah.
what that
Is
correlates
that,
to.
is that
but
because it's your favorite, or is that because you just think this is the pattern we're leading to?
I think, well, both. I mean, I think that I think it's one of Tarantino's best 2 or 3 movies, and I think I'm not alone. I think a lot of people feel the same way about it. Hollywood loves movies about Hollywood.
They do.
Yep.
And
And
I think that gives it definitely a leg up to DiCaprio and Brad Pitt are,
Long time.
yeah, they've been around a
Yeah.
long time,
Yeah.
and
They're
I
seasoned
think
vets.
They are
Is DiCaprio
2 of the old style, along with people like George Clooney. They're movie stars
They
with
are.
in capital
In a
letters.
traditional sense,
There's
yeah.
fewer and fewer of those, and I think Hollywood is going to love all of that combination.
DiCaprio? He's for lead actor, and then Brad
Brad
Pitt's
Pitt's
for
for
supporting.
supporting.
Okay.
Yeah.
I saw some people. This is like kind of unrelated, kind of, but people were upset Margot Robbie didn't get nominated. I'm like, for what? To watch a movie in the movie?
To be in 20 minutes of a movie.
I mean, like you can do
People
that.
have been nominated for less. Than
That
20
people
minutes.
have been
Fair
nominated
enough,
for
fair
less,
enough.
but like, I don't know. I just thought that was
I
ridiculous.
thought she was great in it, by the way, but I
she
understand
was
what
good.
you're
I
saying.
thought she was too, but she didn't do anything that warranted to be nominated. But anyway,
But to me, the biggest competitor probably is The Irishman. I think on the a lot of the same. It's Scorsese,
don't know.
it's Pacino, it's De Niro.
I still think Netflix may. It's
Get
going to be a few
discount-
more.
dis-
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be the Netflix discount, right? That's going to take away some votes, and eventually that's going to stop happening.
Yeah.
I mean, Roma did it last year with Roma won Best
Roma
Picture
did, yeah.
last year, right?
No,
What
No,
won,
it won Best Original Screenplay.
what won
and
Best?
it was one best foreign
What
language.
won Best
Yeah.
Picture last year?
Oh yeah, what did win?
Now you
Best
got me blanking. On,
How do I not know this?
Shit.
I could have swore Roma.
To be
won
honest,
Best
It's not Roma.
Let's look this
I,
up.
I should have
Oh God, what else came out that year?
the best picture. Now I'm still up on my phone from our earlier conversation. So give me just a second. I will pull it up.
I'll try to be entertaining while y'all are on your screens.
Possible.
But no, I mean, if you
have
don't
no
know,
idea.
I think there is definitely a bias for some members
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
Academy towards Netflix movies.
And for some
because of
reason,
the
I even
theatrical
thought-
issues.
Oh my
I thought
God.
Scorsese.
The Green
was a-
Book.
Green
right?
Book.
Yeah,
was-
Green
Oh,
Book. See,
yeah, I
we've
remember.
already forgotten. the Green
We've
Book.
forgotten it for good reasons. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Well,
He won Best
for
Director.
some reason, I thought Scorsese was a part of that part of Hollywood that was a little bit turning their nose up to streaming versus theater. Maybe I misread. I could have sworn I just remember.
He probably
I don't
wa-
think
he
he-
probably was until they gave him money for the Irishman.
Well, was it Spielberg? Somebody like, the
Spielberg
past couple
come
years
out and said
something
it.
very publicly.
Spielberg's the one who's. Yeah,
But then he's now on Apple. He's signed exclusively to Apple TV now.
Yeah.
But he hasn't. I mean, I don't think he's against streaming platforms. He just thinks that that's not a movie for him.
Yeah.
That's a TV movie, right? That's a
Yeah.
Which I think
like the
there
old
may be
TV.
a few of these guys that grew up in the era where a TV movie meant massive, abuse of
think
the
that-
movie.
yeah.
I mean,
Because we put
Spielberg's
on
first
TV.
movie is a TV movie called Duel.
Yeah, yeah,
Cool, yeah. It's his first film.
And I think that's what he'd point to and say, "Well, I made a movie for TV too."
Yeah.
And if it should qualify for something, it should qualify. For
His
something.
first real
I
movie is
disagree
Close
with him, but I think that
I do
that's-
too.
That's his. That would be his argument.
It's interesting.
Um,
I think for me, honestly, I mean, look at the list. I can see the Irishman getting it for obvious reasons, but I really feel like the Joker is going to come in and like it's got a lot of it's not because I want it to, even though
This is from the guy who was sure that the Avengers was going to get nominated for an Academy Award.
Which one? Avengers Endgame?
The one before.
Infinity War? It fucking should have.
Yeah, see?
It probably should have for like visual effects at the very least.
I think it was nominated for visual effects.
It was nominated for visual effects?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you thought it'd get nominated for Best Picture.
No, of
and
course
you
it
went
would.
around telling everyone it was going to get
It should
nominated.
have.
That was
So, you know.
that was a dumb take right there.
If Black
One of the
Panther can, then
things that
Infinity
you are
War
aware
should
of.
have. But no, but I mean, look, all that aside, Joker's not like other comic movies, right? And I feel like its mass appeal on a box office level, and that coupled with, I mean, you can't deny it has 11 nominations. It has the most.
Yeah.
It has the most nominations, and it's very
It helps
real.
having Joaquin Phoenix.
It's very real chance that it could walk away with some. I think it will win Best Actor, but I think it will win Best Score. And I think it has a good chance at Best Cinematography, although I can see Deakins taking it away. But Best Picture or Best Director would not surprise me if it happened. I don't know. I think Best Director might go to Tarantino. Now that you've said that, when you said it, kind of clicked my head. Like it's his 9th film.
Has he won Best Director?
No, he hasn't.
No,
I can see that.
I don't believe so.
Yeah.
That seems a little odd.
I just think that the Joker's going to have some things going against it. There's going to be members of the Academy who still see it as a comic book movie. Todd Phillips, of course, is primarily known for directing the Hangover movies.
That's true.
Right.
Even when we were talking about Green Book versus Roma, now maybe it could win Best Picture, but Green Book won Best Picture. Peter Farrelly, who of course is one of the Farrelly brothers, did not win Best Director. That actually was Alfonso Cuarón who won Best Director last year.
That's right.
So I think that Todd Phillips' previous body of work is going to count against him, may or may not count against the movie, although Green Book was a completely different movie last year than Joker.
Yeah.
To be fair, Craig Mazin has been sweeping everything from Chernobyl, and his credits up to that point were as equally maybe as
but still,
questionable.
He's in TV, right?
That's true.
That's
Fair
a
enough.
little easier.
Yeah.
It's a dark movie. It ends darkly. I think all of those things. It has no female parts to speak of. Some other movies don't, by the way, as well. And The Irishman got some criticism.
I was going to say,
Hollywood does an interesting thing with.
And people have debated
portrayals.
that, but at least it does have a compelling female character. I only bring that up, of course, because of all the politics that have gotten.
It's worth bringing up.
Sure.
Here's something
And
interesting.
so that's kind of why I'm wondering if the Joker can.
I think it can win Best Actor. I don't know if it'll win Best Director, but I could see if like Once Upon a Time wins Best Director, I could see Joker walking away with Best Picture. I don't know. It would blow my mind.
I think it is interesting because there's with 9 movies and just with the way the voting works, I think the voting could spread out. And
I could easily see Hollywood and The Irishman splitting a lot of that kind of old guard Hollywood vote.
And Joker coming in.
And Joker coming in with maybe some of the younger votes or something.
We got to get a little nerdy here for a second because the way the Oscar voting works now is you rank order all 9 movies.
Yeah, that's right.
And they tally up all of the scores.
Right.
And whoever's last is dropped out. Then anyone who had that movie on their ballot, then their second place vote gets, right? So it's not just what movie gets the most first place votes.
It's very strategic.
It's also what movies get the most second and third place votes.
Because you get different amounts of points depending on where it's ranked, I guess.
Well, and so like if let's say you voted for Ford versus Ferrari and it gets knocked out, then if I understand it correctly, then they look at all of your next votes, right?
Gotcha. So
and then those votes get counted.
So if Ford versus Ferrari was your number 1 and it gets knocked out because of other votes, your number 2 is now your number 1?
Well, and it just keeps happening. And so the votes keep getting redistributed. And so basically, if a lot of people have Joker in last place, right, that could hurt it. That is part of, I think, the movie that wins is the movie that also has the most broad support. I could be wrong about this. We ought to research.
No,
it.
you're right. You're wrong.
But I think that's how it works. So a movie that's a little polarizing that could get maybe the most, the Joker maybe in the first round even gets the most first place votes, but that's not, with 9 movies, let's say it gets 20% of the first place votes, and that's
a
the
really
highest
strange
number.
voting system.
It is interesting.
But that's exactly what that's the whole point, is that with 9 movies, the top movie is not going to have more than 20 or 25% of the votes, probably.
Right.
And do you want to give the Academy Award to a movie that most people didn't actually vote for in first place, right? So then that's what happens. So then you take those other votes and then you redistribute them in terms of the rankings and then a movie that was second place on everyone's ballot versus a movie that was first place on half the ballots and last place on the other half. The second place movie, I think, would win.
Gotcha.
Now that you're saying that, and I agree, you're right. You are right. Parasite may win. I mean, like, there's not
Parasite could win.
There's not a single person I've heard say Parasite is not basically perfect.
Right.
And I mean, all these other films, other than Ford versus Ferrari, where it's very well made. It's a great movie. It's just
I wouldn't put Ford versus Ferrari.
But it's not like something that people just will keep talking about forever. Unlike Parasite, where everyone's like just foaming at the mouth over it. They are. I mean, it's good.
Yeah. They must have a Parasite.
For me,
looking at this list, it's a little difficult because I've only seen 4 of the 9 movies, and so I personally think I've obviously seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and The Irishman. So it's hard for me to weigh in on the Joker debate, but I do see that it is very there's half of the internet that thinks you are disturbed if you like that movie, and then the other half that think it's the most genius piece of art, in the last 10 years or something. So it's hard for me to know that, but I do see The Irishman and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's got all those old stars and big names behind it, people that have been known for years. I mean, Scorsese. I mean, it's basically, this is Scorsese's sequel to Goodfellas, and that's a big deal.
Do you like The Irishman? Did you guys like The
I
Irishman?
like The Irishman.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
it was long. It was
kind of weird that De Niro didn't get nominated for Best Actor. Isn't that kind of interesting?
Yeah.
Compared to Pacino, and I mean, I can see Pesci because I just adore Pesci.
Yeah.
Did Pacino get for
Best
supporting?
Supporting? Yeah, he got. Yeah, isn't that fascinating?
That is interesting. I mean,
and De Niro did a good job. I mean,
he did a good job. I will say he has pretty much the same temperance. Maybe that entire movie, he doesn't show a large range of emotion. You know what I mean? And that's kind of his character is that he's just kind of this, cut and dry, black and white kind of guy. But yeah.
I mean, part of it also because we just don't see Pacino and Pesci in movies anymore, not big movies, and so it's De Niro's still around.
Monster movies.
These two are back, so let's give them some. I don't know. It's interesting.
It's they're back to their roots, the monster movies.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But yeah,
I don't know.
All that to say, honestly, I think I probably haven't even seen what would be my Jojo Rabbit and Parasite. I think it's probably going to be between those two as far as what my personal movie of the year would be of this list. And I wish Honey Boy was on it because I feel like that would be up there as well.
Jojo Rabbit, I think, is just it's out of all those movies, it is the most. It's the most feel good by far. It's also the most commercial.
More feel good than
Than what?
Well, Ford versus Ferrari
it's
has
definitely
some,
more feel good than Ford versus
I haven't
Ferrari.
seen Little Women.
Little Women is very feel good.
Is it? Okay, that's the only one I haven't seen on the
assumed it
list. That's the only one I haven't seen, but.
And they don't have Nazis or Hitler, so they may be a little more feel good.
I mean, JoJo is such an interesting movie. You guys both need to watch it. So
I've seen some people coming out of it that don't grasp the satire,
right?
And I'm like, oof.
But it's not.
I'm sure the Academy voters would.
Oh, please. I mean,
there's
the only reason it's up there is
on a movie level. There's honestly nothing. When I walked out, I was like, I had no problems with it. It was just fuck, that was just a great movie. You know what I'm saying? It was just
I love Taika Waititi.
I can like Avengers and all that stuff all day long and preach about it, but I can also turn my brain off and know when there's problems and that kind of stuff. But Jojo Rabbit, I'm like, perfect. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it looks like it is.
It's great.
It looks right up my alley.
Yeah,
I think a movie like that or Little Women could be sort of the Green Book thing. Again, it's that movie that not many people put first on their ballot, but a lot of people put second or third on their ballot, which is, I suspect, what happened with Green Book.
Yeah, I can just see JoJo.
The only thing is, and this is interesting, maybe there's besides Parasite, there isn't really any people of color leading any of these movies.
Not at
right?
all. Yeah. Not at all. Yeah.
I do feel like the Green Book was kind of riding a Moonlight coattail, maybe even just Mahershala Ali being in it. That they were like, oh, this, story about, race and inequality and all this stuff will I don't know.
It's so weird to go from Moonlight to then go to Green Book.
Right.
It's like they're just.
I wonder what he feels about that. Mahershala feels about it.
I mean, he was in it, but there's like, I mean, granted,
he was in both, by the way.
Yeah, he was.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. What he felt about going from being in a movie like Moonlight and then the next year being in Green Book.
I see.
I
thought you meant just what
the kind of vitriol that came around about it afterwards. I just wondered what he personally feels about it.
Yeah, it's interesting that he's in both of those. I don't know. There's something about Green Book. I honestly, if I'm being honest, I haven't seen it. I know everything about it and,
I haven't either,
the conversation
but I
about
plan
it.
on seeing it.
But it's just that's interesting because it's like a white apologist movie or.
Yeah, it's sort of an old, it's sort of a take on race that you might have expected 30 years ago.
Yes,
right, something that makes us feel better.
Sort of
like,
exactly.
Oh, we're not as bad as we.
Yeah, racial reconciliation.
Right.
The white guy and the black guy getting along at the end.
And there is that kind of like the white guy acts kind of more similar to what stereotypes are about black men, and the black guy has more of the white man stereotypes.
That's sort of the
posh,
twist of the movie.
I'm fancy and I don't eat wings. It's
okay.
when you're watching the trailer and there's a white man teaching a black man how to eat wings, it's like that just feels just weird.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's based on a true story. I just don't feel comfortable any longer.
Wow. No, it's okay. It's interesting. So, final thoughts. What do you think is going to win? You think Once Upon a Time is going to take it?
I think that it's got a really good chance of winning, and then maybe Little Women, maybe Parasite as kind of.
There's been a lot of hubbub about the director of Greta Gerwig not getting Best Director nominations. Do you think that's gonna sway more people to vote for it for Best Picture? Just kind of that.
It could a
rally
little
and cry a little bit.
It could
But
a
also,
little bit. And
how big is the Academy? Like, is it? I'm sure it has to be majority white male. The Academy.
it is still majority white male,
Sure.
and that could count against it. And for Parasite, of course, as a foreign movie, a lot of people may just have just a rule, right?
Subtitles, right? Like, subtitles is such a hurdle.
That belongs in the foreign. They don't even call it foreign language anymore. But
I was kind of
international.
It's
Which still has to be in a foreign language, by the way. But
Roma probably didn't win Best Picture.
Well, I was wondering, like, why it's interesting because I saw that on this. And I saw the best foreign film. I was like, wait a minute, wouldn't Parasite win? Like by default, I don't get it.
Yeah, what is are there rules as far as what qualifies as a foreign film, and can a foreign film be nominated for Best Picture no matter what?
So the foreign language films are nominated by their country. So every country puts one movie forward from their country, and
That's an interesting way to do it.
So South Korea
vote on it.
What's that?
Then the
American Academy votes for it.
The American Academy votes on what's the best foreign film. Then is that how it works? I'm asking.
Yeah, so all of these countries nominate their movies, and then the Academy chooses which of the 5 are going to be.
That does seem strange. I just who in the countries are deciding this? Is it like the
It's
president?
the various their version of the Academy.
That part doesn't bother me. The part that bothers me is kind of the Academy deciding because it's like they can't be.
I would feel like countries like.
But the Academy is deciding all the other nominees too.
They are,
but
but
they're judging another country's work. I just feel like I feel like if knowing kind of the attitude of French cinema or the French filmmaking scene, I could see them being like, we don't care what Americans think about our films, kind of attitude.
They might, but they're still going to send their nomination.
Money. Yeah, makes sense. But what differentiates it between like international and foreign? Like how does?
Well, so it was always foreign language, and then they changed the title. It's now not called Best Foreign Language Film anymore, but it still has to be. They have some math, 60% in a language other than English or something like that. And there's actually been some controversy. If you do a little Googling, there was a couple of countries that had submitted movies. I think Nigeria or someone was one of them, where the Academy basically said there's too much English in this, it doesn't qualify. And so they rejected it and didn't put it up with the other.
That does seem
for the
problematic
Academy
for countries that have a large English-speaking population, or like countries where English is the second language.
Yeah, I mean,
it seems like we only have to use.
It's a weird, tricky thing, because then
Well, then how does Parasite make that leap? Then just because it's so good, it transcends being international. Like,
yeah, exactly.
That seems problematic.
Yeah, and so yeah, I mean,
I see that part as just that's capitalism, right? The more popular a movie is, the more it sells tickets, the more notoriety it has. I mean,
well, and it goes through the same process, presumably, that all the other nominees go through. I'm assuming, gosh, I'm not actually sure, but I assume the Academy gets a long list of movies, and the members vote on which ones they think should be the nominees, right? And so Parasite is included on that list. but there are rules, right? Any movie that's nominated for Best Picture has to have had a theatrical release in the United States and run for at least a week, right? So most of the nominees for foreign language movies aren't going to have done that.
Right. I mean,
some of them might have, right?
Parasite did. Parasite did actually run in the States.
Yeah, and Roma did last year.
I'd be interested in the story
so
behind
that qualified it for Best Picture potentially, and then obviously enough of the Academy members
It's interesting.
said it was one of the 9 best movies.
Roma made more sense to me though, just because of the director. It's Alfonso Cuarón, who's kind of up there in the elite echelon of like people that look at really talented directors of Hollywood, right? And so to me, I always thought, oh well, it's Cuarón. It's this guy that made Children of Men and Amelia and all these other movies that people have known for forever. So it makes sense that the Academy would be aware of it. I do wonder what is this as a South Korea film?
Yes.
A Parasite. I wonder what the process of getting it into American theaters was like for them. Did they have to like get like a grassroots, kind of belief in in South Korea and other Asian countries?
They won the Palme d'Or also, didn't it?
Yeah. So it just
kind of wrote awards.
It gets American distribution, and a lot of foreign movies get American distribution and actually do play in like New York or LA.
But not a lot play in Arkansas.
Not a lot play in Arkansas, but some
very
play in
few.
Arkansas.
Yeah.
Very few. But yeah, they're a lot of them are getting qualified, but also again they've got to be the movie that plays in the United States has also got to be the movie that the country nominates, right? And if those aren't the same thing, so I'm sure there were French movies that played in the United States that qualified, but the movie that the French nominated is this movie called Les Miserables. It's not the musical, but it hadn't been released in the U.S. yet.
Gotcha.
Right? So that movie just automatically wasn't going to be considered for Best Picture.
Interesting.
It all is very interesting.
Yeah, it is. Well,
we talk about a process we have no power or control over, and most likely we'll never have power or control over.
We'll see what happens.
Amateur speculators.
Yes, exactly.
And in just a short month, a month and a half, we'll know who won and who didn't.
What's the date? Is it late January?
It's February.
It's actually February 9th. So
wow.
3 weeks from now.
Wow. Okay.
or so.
February 9th,
Cool.
3 weeks from now.
We'll definitely
that's
be
a little
touching.
scary.
Actually 3 weeks today.
We'll be touching back
19th.
on the winners and that kind of stuff. And I mean, Bruce, if you want to come back,
Sure,
and talk
I'd
about
love
it.
to.
And
Yeah,
you
it'd
can
be fun.
Watch some more movies so we can actually talk.
I
about
do need to watch some more movies. That's always my problem.
That's true.
It's hard when you have a child and a wife and not a lot of money.
There you go.
Just another great segue to give us money.
Yeah. And how can
money.
How can our listeners write in and ask?
All right. So we have this wonderful bit.ly link, bit.ly/241mail. Brings up a nice Google form doc. And you're invited to make fun of Donovan.
Please.
In the description.
Right. So, and very soon we'll have our website up, February, podcast241.com. And then also you can find us at podcast_241 on Instagram, and then podcast241 on both Twitter and Facebook. And please like and subscribe. And also, if you find us on iTunes or Spotify or however you listen to us, YouTube, whatever, subscribe, give us a rating, review. It helps people find us. And hopefully we can, keep making more content for you guys so you guys can listen to or watch.
Later this week, though, we'll be making, I think, another one episode where we'll be hitting second half of Witcher.
Right.
Maybe first half or all of Watchmen. Haven't decided.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
And then some other fun entertainment news is wasn't sure we added much more to the docket, but
yeah, you show up and we'll tell you things.
Yeah, exactly. for the 50 people that will watch this at all or less.
50's not bad.
For the
bigger and bigger.
for the 10 people that watch the first 5 seconds and turn it off.
There you go. That makes more sense.
They're already gone. I don't know why I'm talking to them.
So how can we find you, Daniel, on social media?
I'm on social media. You can just find me there.
There you go. Bruce?
Yeah, you can just search Daniel Wingfield. I might not accept your follow request, though. So
I will
do it
accept
at
your
own
follow
risk,
request.
I guess.
I will accept your follow request, and then I'll delete it after you start following me.
Got him. We don't do that on Instagram all the time.
And Bruce, how can our listeners find
I'm
you?
on Instagram and Twitter. I don't use Twitter that often.
Me
BD
neither.
Hutch.
BD Hutch.
B as in Bruce.
Perfect. We'll put that down in the description below if you want to reach out to Bruce for any of your filmmaking questions. He's a source of knowledge, and we're always going to him.
And if you want a film degree, you can reach Bruce in the classroom as your professor, and he will grade you on papers.
There you go. So I'm Donovan Thompson.
I'm Daniel Wingfield.
And Bruce Hutchinson.
And we have spoken.
I'm only good.